Now, I'm wondering if I should buy a Mac or a PC. I'm thinking that Macs are better, and I'm going to explain why. PCs, they have their own problems. Different parts of them can have issues, and they kind of build them with various companies like Logitech. The hard drives are made from a different company, different manufacturers, and that's how they build the PCs. They're not integrated well. However, Macs, they have their own companies that will build the system. It's all Mac owned, and it integrates perfectly. So the OS system, the operating systems for PCs, the Windows operating system I'm specifically talking about, the PCs, they often have different parts, and you kind of have to figure out what exactly works with the operating system, and some work, some don't. Some things don't always work out perfectly, but and there are problems with that. Mac, however, their operating system, parts of that, there's like thousands and thousands of components of their operating systems. On PCs, like they have Office, their softwares they vary. There's a lot of different parts. They don't necessarily work with Windows. Sometimes there are glitches and problems that come up with Windows. But Mac, on the other hand, they have their own requirements. They filter which companies will accommodate them, and then let go of the ones that can't. If there are bugs or glitches or things that pop up, they're willing to make fixes to that, but PCs on the other hand are not. Mac always, for a long time, they've kind of been the top as far as image quality, for movie production. A lot of people use Mac for that. It really works well for that. You can see the picture quality great. PCs, Windows, they are pretty far behind. They are catching up though, yes. They still have problems though. But Mac, there's a lot of software included. It's nice. You only have to do it one time. PCs, there's all sorts of problems, and you have to buy different software in order to fix those bugs, and there's a base cost associated with that. Macs are more expensive, and in certain regards, PCs are better than Mac. One cool thing about PCs, one really cool thing, is that when you go in there and you try to fix, like let's say, you kind of go into your own world to kind of fix things, if that's okay. Mac's really locked and avoids people from coming in to adjust things like that. So that's one negative. Tech people love PCs. Companies need to accommodate Mac. That's kind of one negative component. But in your home, for your personal use, I suggest you use a Mac. They're a good company, they're reliable, but again, so if you invest money and you're willing to invest money, I would suggest that you buy Mac, like iPhones, Apple TVs, everything, FaceTime, they all integrate with Mac. PC, it's kind of confusing how that system integrates well into one, so you have to add more complicated fixes to solve the integration issues. But Mac is all an integrated system, so that's something for you to consider. I suggest that you buy Mac. So something you can consider, should I purchase a Mac or PC? I think that Macs are better, and I'll explain why. PCs, they tend to have their own problems. Different parts are kind of pulled together and from different companies like Logitech, all sorts of different companies. The hard drives, different companies put the actual computers together, and they don't always integrate well. So Mac, they have their own, they make all the components to make their own computer, and they integrate very well. PCs, they have their operating system, OS systems, which is Windows. And Windows, for PCs, often there are thousands of things that Windows needs to try to accommodate. And sometimes they accommodate well and sync well. Some things don't always sync well. So there are problems that pop up with that. Mac, however, they have their operating system. They all have kind of the same thing. There's about 50 things, but in Windows, in PC, there's thousands of accommodations that they need to make, like in Office, what are some of the software issues. There's lots of different software for PCs. They don't always match Windows, and that's one of the challenges. If you try to upgrade, sometimes there's issues with the coordinating of the OS, the operating systems. Mac, however, they don't just allow everybody to develop different types of software. They are quite particular about what they expect, and sometimes there are glitches or bugs that come up. There are less, however, with Mac and versus PC. I think Macs are better. Image quality, Mac always has been kind of the top as far as image quality is concerned. Like shows or movies, animation, animators, they tend to use Mac because it's very reliable, it's easy to see, the quality is better. PC, Windows, they are pretty far behind. They are catching up, however. One problem is that Mac, you only have to integrate the software one time, but PCs, however, sometimes you do have to integrate the software several times. There's a base cost for Mac or for PC, and it is cheaper. However, Mac doesn't have as many problems. There is price included in that. PCs are very cool. You can go in and kind of fix, set it up how you want your own kind of world to be on a PC. Mac doesn't allow that sort of configuration, so you're kind of stuck. It a little bit blocks you out, locks you out. IT people, they do love PCs because they can go in there, configure it how exactly they want it to be. Macs, however, are blocked out. The company expects you to kind of fit to what their expectation is. It's really a personal preference. I do recommend Mac. Macs are good, dependable. The company, some people don't like Mac, but again, you invest your money into Mac. And another thing that's actually really cool, iPhones, Apple TV, they all interface really well with one system. PC, they have Android. They're mixed, everything's kind of mixed together. There's not really one integrated system, so it's kind of complicated to set things up how you want it to be. There can be problems with that. Mac, it's all just one uniform system, so that's something for you to consider. I recommend Mac. Okay, so in reviewing both the first take and the second take, I was kind of, the first video, I'm not necessarily a tech person, so I think finding the correct terminology to match what this gentleman was talking about, because he clearly understood the technical terminology as far as, I had some terminology that I kind of have heard or have maybe use, but I'm more familiar with Mac than I am with PC. So understanding how PCs work and how there are thousands of contractors that develop software and work with the PCs now, that's clear to me after I watched it the second time. I was struggling with finding the correct terminology for people that are kind of in the know, which this gentleman obviously was. So my struggles that I experienced trying to come up with the correct words to match his level of discourse was a little bit lacking, honestly. And there was some fingerspelling that I missed, but I don't necessarily think that impacted the work, the overall message. And there were some things that I noticed that I did use the word quite often. So that's kind of my tendency that I realize even as I'm speaking, as I'm looking for words, that's kind of my pause as I'm trying to formulate cohesive and good sentences. Anyway, so that's my reflection.